Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Now, it's been a little while since I posted a video, and usually when I do these videos, I start off by telling you exactly what I'm gonna do in that video. However, one thing I've learned over the last couple of weeks is not everything goes according to plan, and it's not been the most easy couple of weeks. There's definitely been an element of burnout. There's been an element of being overwhelmed by the project and kind of learning sometimes where I need to step away from the camera so I can focus on figuring out what to do with the car. So without further ado, let's jump back into the Mini restoration. The first thing I'm going to tackle this week is actually some of the outer body work, and you can see in this corner it's corroded right the way through, and this is also where it meets the heel board and the boot floor. So we're going to get the tools out and have a little think about how we can make a template up to get that outer skin fixed first. Right, welcome to the table of tools for dealing with these little patches and some of the things that I think I'm going to need. So starting, and in no particular order, I've got my hammer and dolly set, cheap set, but should see me okay. I've got the crimping tool that I used last time. We've also got a couple of clamps. We've got some smaller little welding tools that I've never used before. Super keen to see what they're like. Magnets are always good to have when you're welding. Selection of grinders and some Dremel bits for grinding with that as well. So the first thing we're going to do is just take the cardboard and make the shape of this corner. I kind of want to keep this metal lip here because I think fabricating that is going to be a little bit hard, although if I need to, I will. But for now, we'll take the shape, transfer it to cardboard, and then we can start with cutting, which is a little bit daunting. Now, since making this video, I've actually learned that just using standard A4 paper or that kind of quality paper you get in a printer is far better for making your templates. One of the reasons for that is if you're working on a slightly more convex or concave curve, you can start figuring out where the metal's going to ripple, use some tape to kind of fold it together, and you know which parts of the metal you're going to have to work more than others. So I didn't quite get the shape right on the first cardboard cutout, and it needed extending, and this is the time to get it right, because if I can't even get the template right, then welding in the metal is never, ever going to go according to plan. But I think we're nearly there. Boom. Transferred over to metal, and then we should have what we're going to need for the final shape. So you can pick up metal pretty much from any blacksmiths or metal merchants. This bit I actually got from Amazon, and fast delivery. I only need a little bit, so if that's what you want to do, that's a pretty quick way to get your metal. If you are interested in getting your own metal off of Amazon, I paid just $30 for this 1mm thick sheet metal. It's 1 meter by 500 centimeters, and it is absolutely perfect for doing these small jobs. Now, most of the jobs I'm doing you can do with some form of hand tool, but as I'm planning to improve my skills over the next few years, I invested in yet another tool, which were these budget electric metal shears. The results were pretty good. I'm sorry, but one absolute weapon of a tool. Now, obviously, this doesn't look too pretty, and I've got to finish cutting it, but where I did want to follow the line, look at that. That is mental. That is literally millimeter perfect. So yeah, definitely things to learn with it, but I think it's for $60, one absolute bargain. Right, let's get this finished. I think if I'd known what I know now, I would have been a lot more dubious about going into trying metal fabrication or removing as much of this car as I have. Even this little job took over 2.5 hours to complete. When you add all those little jobs together, it's pretty daunting. Rather than just doing the flat bit of metal, which would be great, I've realised I've lost quite a bit of the lip that I need. So, having never made a panel before, I'm now going to try and make one with this lip on it. I do know, having watched a lot of YouTube videos, that this tends to shrink. So I think I'm going to have to add a little bit more metal on there. I don't know. Let's give it a go. Sitting there for 3 hours with this tiny little bit of metal really gave me an insight into how it kind of works. You have to consider metal similar to clay, and you can relax it and shape it and bend it. And I think the problem is when we think about metal, we think about a very, very hard substance. But the truth is, even with simple tools like this, you can really start to make yourself some very interesting shapes. If you're thinking about doing this yourself, there's a couple of amateur tools that I've been using that have got me really good results. Firstly, we've talked about the hammer and dolly set, and I found that the square-ended hammers worked really well for me. You get these in a cheap set, they're like 20 bucks, so totally get that. And again, when it comes to the dollies, these are cheap, but you can create good stuff with them, so definitely get these. You get different curves, different little bits of metal to work around. So I've got that one, and that's the final one. And I've used all these to really, let me get a bit closer, like get in there and create those edges, because the edge isn't continuous, it changes its curve in different points, so you can continue to move that as you're working along. If you want to save yourself a massive headache and get good panels and not make up your own, head over to our friends at P&L Minis, and they will give you a 10% discount on absolutely everything they have with the code RoverXmas24. But one thing I found really, really useful are these pliers from Halfords, and if I get in really close, see if we'll focus on that. You see the end of those? You see how sharp that grabs on the end? It's like a parrot beak or something, but because of that, I was able to bend just one bit of metal at a time. So if I show you on like a scrap bit here, what I would do is I would get one bit and I'd have my line here drawn on, and I would just bend that just like a few degrees, and then I'd go along a few degrees, go along a few degrees, almost like you're opening a tin of tuna or something. So for me, what worked was not doing the whole bend of 90 degrees as one. It had to be manipulated the whole time. And you can see if you get in there, it's already forming a more of a square edge where the light catches it. Now, as well as that, I've got my other piece that didn't go quite right. But what you'll be able to see on here is when you start forming corners, what I found is these start to ripple. So your metal is literally doing that as it goes along. And that's where you have to be really patient with your hammer and dolly set when you're relaxing and kind of stressing the metal to create something that will end up looking more like that, which, you know what, I'll confess, it's a first time, but I'm so happy with that, given the amount of manipulation we've had to put into this bit of metal. So my very first butt weld on car bodywork. This is going to be interesting. And what I've read are the great things to use for this are these little things. They're called butt welding clamps, and basically you can put them through the metal. They're going to create a tiny little gap of about 1 millimeter for when we're welding. And hopefully this will work. Let's see how well I've managed to cut and template this and if it fits. Once everything was clamped up, it was time to actually crack on with fixing something rather than just pulling things apart. You'll notice whilst I'm doing the welds, I'm doing one weld at a time, and then I'm using my compressed air just to blow on that weld to cool the metal as fast as possible. Basically, I'm trying to make sure I don't warp the body of the vehicle. I'm using a cheap Clark MIG welder that I've had for around about 2 or 3 years, and it's more than sufficient to do these super simple jobs where we're just tack welding 1mm metal. On the other hand, if you're looking for something a little bit dreamy for Christmas, definitely check out Artec's Speedmaster Pro helmet. I've had this for about a month now, and moving from the $20 Amazon helmet that I had before, this thing is absolutely dreamy. Now, I won't lie, I probably was putting that job off by finding other jobs to do in here because I knew how important it was to get this panel work right. And again, something I've never ever done before. But let me show you how far I've got along. So I started with just spot welding it about every inch part, and then I'd go back and do exactly the same thing over and over again. Whilst I was doing it, I was speaking to a friend of mine, Chris, who is down south. He owns a place called Mr. B's Body Shop, and he told me, keep your gloves off, and if you can't touch the metal, it's too hot. So whilst I was doing it, I was feeling all around the metal to make sure nothing was warping. Overall, it's great. There was a little blowout about here, but other than that, it's all gone really, really well. And as well as that, I was also using compressed air. And I was doing that just to cool down the welds, and it seems to have worked. I'm really, really happy with it. Now, it's time to do some grinding and see what it really looks like. Hey, if you're enjoying the video, please like and subscribe. I'd love to have you along for the journey with the Mini and the other classics that we'll be taking a look at over the winter time. Wow, it has been, I think, 6 days since I picked up the camera last. And there's a reason for that, actually. It's don't get me wrong, I love doing this project. The creativity, everything that goes along with that is amazing. But when I was doing that external panel on the Mini, and I kind of finished it after 2 or 3 hours, and then sat back and looked at absolutely everything else that needed doing just on the bodywork, let alone the rest of the car, I started to feel massively, massively overwhelmed with this project. It was the inner arches, the shock towers, the outer corners on both sides, rebuilding all the back end, finding that there was filler on other parts of the body. And on top of that, it was like a lot of these jobs and a lot of these projects always have this ability, I think, to get away from you when you can start off looking at a small area and thinking, right, I just need to fix that. And before you know it, half the car's gone. And you're like, what am I doing? Because I've never done any of the jobs that I've shown you as I've gone through this restoration. I am learning on the job. And what I had to do is essentially put the camera down and just focus on the car. Because as much as I like showing you guys, there is so much work involved in getting the production quality right and making sure the videos look good. And when you're splitting your time between trying to do all that and learn massively intricate new skills at the same time, boom, my brain was just like, it was absolutely done. So, where am I? What has been going on for the last 5 or 6 days, or 1 or 2 seconds in the video world? And where am I? How am I feeling about this? Well, first thing is, let me show you this corner. I'm going to flip the camera around and show you how the bodywork's looking. Here is that corner, and I got on really well with this lip. That's all gone nicely. There's a little bit of fettling in the corner needed, but it's absolutely solid. I've also got a tiny bit of a ridge slightest hump in a couple of places that will need just fettling back down. But do you know what? Knowing that that is all metal now is very, very, very satisfying. So that's been done, and I've sprayed a grey oxide. I think it was a galvanizing primer that I used on this to just protect it as I continue around the car and get other jobs done. After I did that, I got into this little inner arch and just welded on a patch here. So I followed these lines and I just kind of bent this corner around, matched it up and kind of blended in this bit of metal here because that was all rusted out. And again, just on the bottom corner, hopefully you can see this, but I've now separated all of the bad metal on the back, and the lip for my outer sill hasn't been welded on, so that's ready to be separated for whatever I want to do with either the corner or the whole sill. So that's ready to go now. The thing that really kind of triggered that thing a few days ago where I was like suddenly overwhelmed was looking at the shock tower, the inner arch, how it joined up to the back of the rear seats, and trying to figure all that out. And I couldn't see how I was going to do it. I was thinking new panels, more money, how am I going to afford this? But let me show you what I've done on that section. If we look here, there was a huge hole in the shock tower. All that's been fixed up, and there was actually a bit of corrosion on the top of the shock tower as well. So whilst I had the hole here, I ground out all in there. I've put on a solid base on that, and I've just sculpted all this metal to come around on this corner, and I'm much, 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 much more happy with it. As well as that, whilst we're on the inside, I cut from here all the way through the arch, through the back, and then about another 2 inches on the other side. And what I've done with this bit here is, let me show you. So my metal bending skills were never going to get this whole thing from there all the way around to there in one piece. So what I decided to do was cut one section, cut a second section, and then I've got the third one just to go in. And again, you can kind of see the process that I've taken. So I followed the natural lines of the arch, and I've used a hammer and dolly and just kind of beat these into the shape that they needed to be. With this bit, I've already started grinding out the welds so it looks nice and neat. And then with the second section, that's now spot welded in and it's getting filled in. And then lastly, I'll create my cardboard template for this last bit, and we should get that filled in today. And that will be the whole of that inner arch done and the wing, and it will be solid metal and so much better moving forwards. And what I've realized with these jobs is that you can't look at the car overall. I think that the mistake that I made was kind of letting the whole project get to me, and the whole purpose of this channel is for rookies, starters, people that want to get into these projects to see the mistakes that I made or make and continue to make. And sometimes that isn't even like the mistakes that you're making physically on the car. It's like where you are in your head when you're attacking these projects. And one thing I've learned with this is every little bit of fixing this has to be taken as an individual job, because if I step back and look at the whole thing, I'll just decide I'm never going to finish it. And we are absolutely going to finish this car. Next week, we will finally be fitting our new panels from P&L Minis. So stay tuned, subscribe, and I will catch you very soon.